A little girl tried selling her only toy for $30,000. When the millionaire asked why, her answer shattered him. What he discovered next changed all their lives forever. Before we dive into this heart-touching story, tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? I want to feel how far this story is reaching. The sky over the city hung gray and low, like it knew something was about to break. Not the weather, but a little girl's world. On the corner of 8th and Willow, beside a flickering street lamp and a cracked sidewalk, stood an 8-year-old girl too small for the weight she carried. Her name was Lyra Bell, and in her trembling hands she held her most precious possession, a green bunny plush with stitched ears, faded fur, and a heart sewn in with red thread. A cardboard sign was hung around her neck, scribbled in crooked letters, "Selling my favorite toy, please help." Her golden hair, tangled by the wind, framed a face too fragile for the kind of pain hidden behind those bright blue eyes. She didn't call out to passers-by, she just stood there, cold, stiff, scared. People glanced, but no one stopped. No one asked why a child was out alone holding a sign that should never belong to someone her age. And she didn't cry. Not yet. She'd used up most of her tears the night before, kneeling on the bathroom floor when she heard the word cancer whispered through the walls by the doctor on speakerphone. "Stage 1 breast cancer, we can treat it if we start soon." The words bounced around in her small head like a cruel riddle. She had asked quietly, "Mommy, does it hurt?" Her mother, Maris Elowin, pale and weak, forced a smile and brushed her hair aside. "It's nothing, my little moon," she whispered. "I'll be fine, you go play." But Lyra didn't play. Instead, she counted the coins she had saved for nearly 7 months in a glass jar labeled "Dream Trip to the Toy Shop." Last week she bought the bunny from that very jar. Today she was selling it back to the world, because the doctor said $30,000 was needed. Lyra didn't know how much that was, just that her mommy cried behind closed doors and whispered into her pillow when she thought Lyra was asleep. Her Mommy's strong arms felt thinner. Her laughter sounded more tired. And when Lyra once asked, "Where's my daddy?" her mother smiled through pain and said, "He's in heaven, sweetheart." So Lyra learned to be brave. The kind of brave little girls shouldn't have to be. That morning, she kissed her mother's forehead and left without saying goodbye, knowing if she did, she might never walk out the door. Not far away, in a sleek car with black-tinted windows and a heart that hadn't broken in years, Silas Wren, 30-year-old billionaire CEO, waited at a red light. His Royal Ferozy tailored suit was flawless. His blue eyes scanned his phone as assistants flooded him with back-to-back texts. But his gaze lifted when he saw something strange, a little girl, standing alone, holding a toy instead of a parent. His foot stayed pressed against the brake, but his chest, it clenched. He rolled down the window. The wind brought her voice, barely a whisper. "Would you like to buy my bunny?" Silas blinked. At first he thought it was some staged charity stunt, but when he stepped out and knelt in front of her, something in her eyes pulled him apart like a thread unraveling from the soul. "Why, are you selling it?" he asked softly. And her reply? It wasn't loud, but it hit him like a truck. "Because she needs it more than I do." His voice cracked. "Who's she?" Lyra hugged the bunny tighter. "My mommy. She said she'll be okay, but she lies sometimes when she's sick. The doctor said we need money or else she'll—" She stopped. Tears welled up but didn't fall. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry in front of strangers. Silas swallowed hard. This wasn't just another heart-tugging moment he could brush off. This wasn't a charity donation he could clear with a signature. This felt like fate dragging him back to something he'd locked away years ago. The toy in her hand, the way her eyes shimmered like someone he once knew. He whispered almost to himself, "What's your name?" "Lyra Bell." Everything froze, the sidewalk noise, the horns behind him, his breath, his pulse. Because that name, that last name. He remembered a letter, a photo, a woman he once loved, a decision he regretted, a life he never followed up on. He looked at her again, really looked. And the questions started to race. Who is this little girl really? Where is her father? Why does she look like someone I used to love? As the wind lifted her hair gently and her small hands offered him the bunny once more, something inside Silas shattered. And that's when he said the words he didn't plan, with a voice trembling, "Keep the toy, but let me see your mommy." Because deep down, something told him he already had. The soft hum of city life buzzed in the background, but Silas Wren only heard her silence, the way her tiny fingers gripped the worn edges of the toy she held so close to her chest. He knelt slowly, as if afraid to scare her away, like she was a fragile truth the world had forgotten. His sharp Ferozi suit brushed the concrete as his eyes searched hers, not with pity, but with a desperate need to understand. His voice was tender, barely louder than a whisper. "Why are you selling this, sweetheart?" She blinked up at him, wide blue eyes shimmering with something older than her 8 years. Her golden curls shifted as she lowered her gaze, fingers tightening protectively around her green frog toy. "I don't sell toys," she said at last, her voice so small it was nearly stolen by the wind. "Just this one." Silas's brows furrowed. "But why this one? It looks important." She nodded slowly, as if the weight of that question lived in her chest. "It is. It was my best friend during the nights Mommy was in pain." His heart clenched. "Then why let it go?" She hesitated, staring at her shoes, scuffed and worn. "Because she's more important." The tremble in her voice was like glass cracking. Silas leaned forward gently. "More important than your favorite toy," she nodded again. "Mommy said, real love means giving up something you love for someone you love more." His chest ached with a memory he couldn't place. "You love your mommy a lot, huh?" She didn't look up, but her voice was steel. "She's all I have." Silas swallowed the lump rising in his throat. "Is she okay?" That's when her hands began to tremble, knuckles white around the toy. She opened her mouth, but only a dry sob came out first. He waited. He didn't press. He just sat beside her like a stranger who cared. After a long silence, she whispered, "Mommy's sick." Silas turned fully to face her now. "Sick? Like a cold?" She shook her head fast. "No, doctor said. It's in her chest." He used a big word. His breath caught. "What word, Lyra?" She bit her lip. "I don't know how to spell it, but it sounded like cancer." Silas's face went pale. She looked up suddenly, her eyes wide with innocent terror. "Is that the scary one?" He nodded slowly, forcing the pain down. "Yes, sweetheart. It's a very serious one." She swallowed hard. He said it's just the beginning. But she needs help. Fast. Silas leaned in, heart racing. "Did the doctor say what kind of help?" Lyra opened the side pocket of her small backpack and pulled out a crumpled envelope. She handed it to him, fingers shaking. He opened it carefully. Inside was a doctor's note and a cost estimate. His eyes scanned the paper and froze. $30,000 for early-stage breast cancer treatment. He looked back at her. "You understood this?" She nodded. "He told me. He said if we don't start soon, she might not wake up someday." Her voice cracked on the word wake. Silas clenched the paper. "And your mommy? Where is she now?" "She's home. Resting. I told her I was going to the park." The lie twisted in the air like smoke. Silas studied her. "She doesn't know you're trying to sell your toy?" Lyra looked guilty. "She'd cry. So, I didn't tell her." He exhaled deeply, overwhelmed by the courage packed into this little girl's body. "How long have you had this toy?" he asked gently. 7 months. I bought it with my birthday money and lunch savings." He blinked. "You saved for this?" She nodded. "1 coin at a time." Silas couldn't look away from her now. "And now you're giving it up?" "I prayed last night," she said softly. "I told God I'd give my favorite thing, if He saves Mommy." Tears welled in Silas's eyes. He hadn't cried in years, but something about her broke every barrier. She tilted her head. Do you think he heard me? He choked back emotion. I think he sent someone too. Just then, a gust of wind carried the faint sound of a passing siren. She flinched. I hate that sound. It reminds me of when Mommy fainted. Silas nodded slowly. That must have been scary. She said nothing, just held the toy tighter. He looked at her green frock, the way it was ironed carefully despite the day's weight. Who helped you dress this morning? He asked. She smiled faintly. Mommy, she always says, even warriors need to wear something pretty. He smiled through tears. Then, gently, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his wallet. She looked at it nervously. I don't want money, mister. I just want someone to help her. He paused. What if I do both? She blinked. Both? I help, and I take the toy. Her hands tightened. Promise you won't throw it away? He placed a hand on his chest. Cross my heart. She slowly extended the toy toward him. Just as their hands touched, a sudden realization struck him. His eyes widened. His hand froze mid-air. He stared at her. His breath caught. That toy. The stitching. The exact kind. He had seen it before. Not in a store, but in a photo. A photo from 8 years ago. A photo Maris had sent him. The day she told him she was pregnant. His pulse quickened. His world blurred. He looked at Lyra's eyes, blue, just like, no. It couldn't be, but he had to know. Lyra, he whispered, voice trembling. What's your mommy's name? Cess. He looked at him innocently, and said, Maris Elowen. The sky was heavy with clouds, but not heavier than the burden on her tiny shoulders. Little Lyra Bell, just 8, stood at the edge of the crowded street, gripping a small green dinosaur toy to her chest. The toy was slightly worn, the fabric soft from hundreds of hugs, her favorite, her only real friend. She didn't have a price tag on it, just a tiny sign written in a child's shaky handwriting, for sale. Each passing footstep felt like a possible miracle, each face a chance, maybe someone would stop. But they didn't. They kept walking, eyes locked on their phones or their worries, ignoring the little girl on the curb. Her golden curls danced in the wind, but her blue eyes remained fixed and unmoved, holding back tears. A man dropped a coin near her feet, assuming she was begging. She didn't move. She wasn't begging, she was offering. This toy had cost her 7 months of pocket money, carefully saved by skipping candy and cartoons. She had chosen it from a shelf on her birthday. Today, she was giving it away. Not for money, for a reason much heavier than her backpack and lunchbox ever were. Her little lips trembled as she looked left, then right, searching for something she hadn't yet found. A family passed by with their child laughing, holding balloons. Lyra turned her face away quickly. She gripped the toy tighter, whispering to it like it could hear. Just one person. Please. Her shoes were scuffed, her green frock wrinkled from sitting on the pavement since morning. People whispered, where are her parents? But no one stopped to ask her. She wiped her nose with the sleeve of her jacket and looked up again, still hopeful. The wind carried a paper cup across the sidewalk, brushing her feet. She gently moved it aside, careful not to disturb her little display. A woman looked down at her and smiled, but kept walking. Lyra's heart sank again. She bent down and straightened the sign, adjusting the toy beside it. She whispered, Mommy, this will help, right? Behind her, the city roared with life, horns, chatter, footsteps, none of which heard her silent plea. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. Hunger wasn't the most painful thing today. Her pain had a name. Cancer. The first time she heard it, she thought it was the name of a bad dream. But the dream didn't end. Her mommy, Maris Elowen, was sick. And not the drink soup and rest kind of sick. She remembered hiding behind the curtain when the doctor said, first stage, urgent care, $30,000. That number sounded like a fairy tale dragon, too big, too scary. She didn't cry then, but she cried that night. When Mommy kissed her forehead and said everything would be okay, but didn't look okay. Lyra had searched her piggy bank, her old jacket pockets, even under the rug. Then, she looked at the toy sitting at the edge of her bed, and she made a decision no 8-year-old should ever have to make. So here she was. She stood straighter now, brushing off the dust from her toy. A little boy reached toward it, but his mom pulled him away. Lyra's heart leapt, then dropped. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "God, I'll be good, I promise. Just please help her." Her lips formed a trembling smile every time someone glanced her way. But they never stopped. Until a quiet hum, low, smooth, expensive, broke through the usual chaos of the city. The noise of a luxury engine slowed just beside her tiny feet. She didn't turn at first, people often parked here. But this engine didn't cut off. It purred like it was waiting. She peeked out of the corner of her eye and saw it. A car the color of royalty, deep Ferozi. The window rolled down slowly, revealing sharp eyes behind glass. Then the door opened. A polished black shoe stepped onto the pavement, and then the man appeared. Tall, striking, with ocean blue eyes that scanned the street, then landed on her. His suit shimmered even in the sea. Loudy light, tailored, crisp, commanding. He didn't speak. He just watched her. His gaze wasn't cold like the others. It was curious, soft, almost stunned. Lyra blinked twice, unsure if she should look away or say something, but she didn't. Because for the first time that day, someone truly saw her. Not the sign. Not the toy. Her. She clutched the dinosaur tighter, afraid he might tell her to leave. But he didn't. The wind tugged at her dress as he took one slow step forward. She held her breath, so did he. Then, for a long moment, they just stared at each other, two very different worlds colliding silently on a sidewalk. And just before she could say a word, he knelt down to her level, and asked, gently, carefully, like handling glass, "Why are you selling this?" The little girl's fingers tightened around the edges of the toy as the man in the sharp Ferozi suit knelt to her level, his polished shoes inches from the worn sidewalk where she stood. His eyes, once cold and calculating from boardroom battles, now softened with something foreign, concern. He didn't speak right away, letting the silence stretch like a question too fragile to touch. The city's noise dimmed around them, taxis whizzed, feet hurried by, but in this moment, only they existed. "Is that your favorite?" he finally asked, nodding to the weathered plush rabbit she clutched. Her lashes fluttered like shutters hiding something too heavy for her age. She looked at the toy, then at him, unsure whether to speak or run. But something in his calm presence told her she didn't need to be afraid. "Yes," she said, barely louder than the breeze brushing through her tangled hair. Then, "Why are you selling it?" he asked gently, trying not to break the fragile bridge of trust forming between them. Her lips quivered. She looked down, toeing the cracked pavement with her tiny shoe. He could see her swallow, "Oh," and twice, as if forcing the words to come up through a locked throat. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Because Mommy's sick." Silas blinked, the weight of those two words heavier than any corporate crisis he'd ever faced. He glanced at the rabbit again, its fur faded, its ear stitched back with blue thread, and felt a lump rise in his throat. "How sick?" he asked, not as a millionaire now, but as a man forgetting the world around him. The girl hugged the toy tighter, as if squeezing it would give her the courage to answer. "She can't breathe right," she murmured, eyes still fixed on the ground. "And she sleeps too long now." He felt something cold ripple down his spine. "Has she seen a doctor?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She nodded once, then shook her head quickly. "Just once. They said we need money, but we don't have any." Silas looked around. Where was her family? Why was this child alone? "Where's your dad?" he asked softly. Her eyes met his, then, big, blue, and drowning. "Don't got one. Mommy says he went to the stars." Silas felt his heart punch against his chest. The weight of her innocence, her way of saying death, left him speechless. She held out the rabbit now, arms trembling. "You can take him," she said. "He's clean, and still squeaks if you press here." She showed him with a gentle press to its belly. A faint, broken squeal escaped. He didn't reach out. He couldn't. "Sweetheart, I don't want to take your friend," he said, voice cracking more than he wanted. "But I need to sell him," she said urgently. "Mommy says if we don't get help, she might go to the stars too." Silas closed his eyes for a beat. This wasn't just a sad story. This was her reality. "How much do you need?" he asked, already fearing the answer. The girl took out a wrinkled paper from her pocket. A hospital slip, scribbled with numbers. She pointed at a circled amount, her hand shaking. "This much," she said. "They said 30,000. Silas's eyes widened, his breath caught halfway in his throat. $30,000. Not fi, or a car or a watch, but to keep a mother alive. He looked at the child again, her tiny frame standing like a soldier of hope in a battlefield too big for her. She didn't cry, she didn't beg. She simply stood, offering her most loved treasure in return for one more day with her mom. A silence grew again, but this time it was heavier, filled with unspoken decisions. Silas felt something inside him shift, like the gears of a machine finally clicking into humanity. And as her words echoed, 30,000, he stared at the rabbit again. One toy, one life. He stood up slowly, adjusting his tie out of habit, but the tension in his chest had nothing to do with fashion. He glanced back at his car, the leather seats, the designer briefcase, the untouched croissant beside the gearshift. All of it now seemed useless. When he turned back, the girl was still there, still offering her rabbit like it was currency. "Please," she said, this time her voice thinner. "He's all I got to trade." Silas knelt again, not to speak, but just to look at her. To understand what kind of world made angels like her sell toys to save lives. And then, she lowered her eyes and whispered, "Will you help us?" He opened his mouth to answer, but paused. Something deeper flickered in his expression. He looked back at the paper, then at her. 30,000? He repeated as if testing the weight of the number in his heart. She nodded. "That's what they said. Or else." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Silas's jaw clenched, a storm building behind his composed gaze. And then, without a word, he stood up, his shadow long over her. She looked up, holding her breath. And just before the silence could break her, he said nothing, only reached into his pocket and paused. His fingers froze as he pulled out a checkbook, and slowly asked, "What's your name?" Silas's lips parted slightly, stunned at the number, 30,000. The words lingered in the chilled morning air like a truth too heavy for a child to carry. Lyra didn't flinch, she clutched the toy tighter, as if it was the only steady thing left in her small world. Silas's gaze softened, but his silence pressed against her like a question waiting to be answered. Her blue eyes drifted down, avoiding the pity she feared would come. Then, the wind whispered, and her memory opened like a wound. She was back in their tiny apartment, the wallpaper peeling, the clock ticking louder than usual. "Mommy?" she had asked one night, her voice a trembling thread in the dark. Maris sat on the couch, holding a glass of water like it might shatter in her fingers. "Yes, baby?" she replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her tired eyes. Lyra walked closer, her fingers trailing the old armrest. "Why don't I have a daddy?" she asked, her words almost scared to exist. Maris stiffened. Her eyes fluttered shut, then opened with a quiet ache. He's in heaven, Lyra," she said, her voice softer than a lullaby. Lyra tilted her head, confusion in her eyes. "Did he ever meet me?" she whispered. Maris looked away, pretending to wipe her face. "You were just a baby," she answered. That night, Lyra cried silently under her blanket, holding her toy like a secret guardian. The next morning, the apartment smelled like boiled oatmeal and medicine. Lyra walked quietly down the hallway, drawn to faint voices. The door to the bedroom was slightly open. Inside, 2 doctors stood near her mother's bed. They spoke in low tones, but the words pierced through the crack like needles. Aggressive stage. Too late for chemo. Breast cancer. Metastasizing fast. Without funds, she might not last more than a few weeks. Lyra's tiny hand covered her mouth. The hallway spun. Her mommy, the one who hummed lullabies and brushed her hair with trembling fingers, was dying. But mommy hadn't told her. Not about this. Not about the truth. She ran back to her room, heart pounding like thunder trapped in a tiny chest. The toy lay on her bed, a little bunny with missing stitches and a crooked bow. It had been with her since she could remember. "Daddy gave it to you when you were born," Mommy once said. Now it sat quietly, holding more memories than Lyra could understand. She picked it up, clutching it like a lifeline. The world outside felt too big, too loud, too unfair. She tiptoed back to her mother's room and watched her sleeping. Tubes by her bedside. A medicine bottle half empty, a hospital envelope clutched beneath her pillow. Maris looked peaceful, like someone who had made peace with pain. But Lyra hadn't. Not yet. She looked at the clock, 6:12 a.m. She walked to the window, peered out at the quiet street. Then she made a decision only a heartbroken child could make. She slipped on her jeans jacket, put the bunny in a small box, taped it gently with her school's glitter glue. Wrote on top, "For someone who still believes in miracles." Her hands shook, but her heart was steady. She opened the door slowly, sunlight already stretching across the street. The world didn't stop. It never did. But something inside her had. She didn't cry. Not then. She just walked. One step at a time. Her shoes too small. Her backpack too empty. Her soul too full. She passed the bakery. The empty swings. The bus stop where grown-ups always looked at their phones. No one noticed the little girl with a box. No one saw her breaking. Until Silas did. And now here she was, still holding the box, her truth hanging between them. She finally looked up, her voice low. "I didn't want to sell him, but Mommy's not telling me everything." Silas knelt, his heart beginning to crack. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Lyra's lips trembled. "She says she's okay, but I heard the doctors say she won't be for long." Her hands gripped the box tighter. Silas blinked fast, unable to speak. Then she added quietly, "I think I'm losing her." She looked down, then whispered, "And I still don't know who my daddy is." Silas froze. The words hit like a punch to the chest. He stared at her, something shifting in his eyes. "Who told you that?" She didn't answer. She just held out the bunny box. And before he could respond, she turned and ran. Down the street. Tears flying behind her like wings on fire. The box still in her arms. Silas stood there, stunned. Completely shattered. And for the first time in years, he chased after something he didn't understand. She ran as if the world had cracked open beneath her feet, her tiny shoes slapping the pavement, heart thudding louder than traffic. The toy trembled in her arms, gripped tight against her chest as if it could patch what was now breaking inside her. Tears smeared her cheeks, but she didn't stop, because stopping meant feeling, and feeling meant falling apart. The streetlight flickered above her like a heartbeat stuttering, shadows dancing beside her fragile frame. Behind her, the city hummed unaware, uncaring, cold. But a pair of footsteps, distant yet determined, began to follow. Silas Wren, still in his sharp Ferozy suit, hadn't moved at first. Her name. That name. It wasn't just any name, it was the name he'd once whispered under the stars, years ago. Lyra Bell, he repeated to himself, voice hoarse like he'd swallowed glass. The world around him suddenly blurred, and it wasn't the wind, it was memory. His shoes finally clicked forward, slowly, like each step was made of stone. He spotted her turning the corner, slowing now, breathless. She collapsed onto the steps of a closed shop, hugging the toy with the kind of desperation no child should ever know. Silas approached gently, kneeling a few feet away, not to scare her, not to push. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said softly, his voice catching. She didn't look up. "You didn't." She whispered, trembling. "I just didn't want to cry in front of someone again." Silas swallowed, noticing how her shoulders shook. "What's your name?" he asked again, more tenderly. She looked up, hesitant. "Lyra," she said. "Lyra Bell." That was it. The air punched out of his lungs. His breath caught like a sob halfway up his throat. His eyes widened, not just shock, recognition. Bell, Maris Bell. The name burned through the years like wildfire. He remembered the letters he never sent. The last time he saw her, she was crying too. That rainy station. That final goodbye. That broken promise. "I'll come back," he had said. "I swear." But he never did. Life got cruel, complicated. Now here stood this little girl with her face, her name. And that stuffed toy. Wait. He recognized it. It was the one he'd won at the carnival for Maris, over a decade ago. The one he'd given her when she'd first told him she was pregnant. Could it be? No. His knees buckled under the truth screaming to be heard. "How old are you, Lyra?" he asked, voice tight. 8, she said, hugging the toy tighter. His lips quivered. 8. He stepped back, as if the truth was a bullet. The timeline fit, everything matched. She looked up. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Silas blinked rapidly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Because you remind me of someone I knew," he whispered. "My mommy?" His heart stopped. "What's her name?" She hesitated, then answered, "Maris Bell." It was no longer a question of maybes. His hands trembled. Is she in the hospital?" Ira nodded. "She doesn't tell me everything, but I hear things." Silas stood slowly, as if gravity was fighting him. "I need to see her," he said, more to himself than her. Lyra looked up, eyes guarded. "Why?" He looked down with eyes that suddenly held years of sorrow. "Because once, I promised I'd never leave her." "So," he tilted her head, puzzled. "Are you family?" Silas didn't know how to answer. Not yet. He turned, quickly dialing something on his phone. "Driver," he barked, "get the car. Now." Lyra stood slowly. "You're going to see Mommy?" Silas nodded, his voice low. "Yes, I need to know something." The car rolled up, headlights slicing through the night. He opened the door but paused. "Will you come with me?" he asked. She looked scared, unsure, but something in his voice. She nodded. They sat side by side in the back seat, silence heavy. The city blurred past the windows, but Silas saw nothing except memory. He remembered the hospital where she worked, the poems she wrote on napkins, the way she smelled like vanilla and rain, and the letter she never got to read. His chest tightened. What had he missed? What had he done? And now, was it too late? The car screeched to a halt in front of a modest hospital. Fluorescent lights buzzed above the doors like distant ghosts. He jumped out, heart pounding louder than his footsteps. Lyra hesitated before following. "Room number?" he asked the front desk breathlessly. The nurse blinked, surprised. "Maris Bell? Oncology ward, room 208. Silas ran like a man chasing time itself, each hallway echoing with regret. He reached the door and stopped, hand trembling above the handle. Lyra appeared behind him, watching. He took one breath, deep, shaking. Then slowly, pushed the door open. And froze. Silas didn't remember driving. The streets blurred past him like fragments of a forgotten dream. His heart thudded wildly against his chest, each beat echoing a truth he hadn't dared to believe. Lyra Bell, he whispered again, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The name wasn't just familiar, it was a buried heartbeat from a life he'd lost. Rain began to fall as he pulled up to the hospital's emergency entrance. He didn't wait for a valet or even to lock his luxury car. He bolted through the automatic doors, eyes darting between nurses. "Maris Bell," he gasped. "I need to see Maris Bell, now!" The nurse behind the counter blinked, Ed startled by the panic in his voice. "She's in room 412, but sir, only family." "I am family," he snapped, voice cracking with emotion. I might still be." His shoes squeaked against the polished tile floor as he sprinted to the elevator. His reflection in the steel doors looked like a stranger, disheveled, desperate. He slammed the button for the 4th floor and leaned against the wall, breath shallow. The number 4 lit up and the doors slid open with a hollow ding. Silas raced down the hallway like a man chasing a ghost. He stopped outside room 412, hesitating for a beat. His fingers trembled as he reached for the doorknob. He pushed the door open, and there she was. Maris. Fragile, pale, smaller than he remembered. Her body seemed to sink into the hospital bed, wires and monitors surrounding her like silent witnesses. But even in illness her beauty shone through, gentle, haunting, unforgettable. Silas's breath caught. The years melted away in one cruel moment. He took a step inside, and the world outside vanished. His knees nearly buckled. She looked like she was sleeping, or dreaming. He stood at her bedside, unsure if he was allowed to cry. Was it anger, or grief, or love clawing up his throat? He pulled a chair close and sat beside her, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. "Maris," he whispered brokenly. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was almost a prayer. There were so many things he wanted to scream, but none of them mattered. His eyes scanned the room and landed on a small framed photo beside her bed. It was of Lyra, smiling, her eyes unmistakably his. His breath hitched. She had his eyes. She was his daughter. He didn't need a DNA test. He didn't need proof. That tiny spark in Lyra's gaze, the way her voice trembled, it was like hearing echoes of himself in a song he'd never sung. He clenched his fists, guilt crashing into him like a wave. How could he have missed this? How could she have carried this burden alone? The memory stabbed through him like a blade. Years ago, Maris standing on the porch, tears in her eyes. "I have to go, Silas, you wouldn't understand." And she was gone. No explanation, no goodbye. Only silence. He had searched, but the world had swallowed her whole. Now she was here, battling a sickness he couldn't name yet. But something deeper hurt more than any diagnosis. She had hidden his daughter from him. But, had she meant to? Or was she trying to protect them both from something darker? He reached for her hand. It was cold, trembling, alive but weary. "Maris," he whispered again, softer, as if his voice might anchor her back to the world. Beeping from the monitor remained steady. Outside, thunder rolled like grief-made sky. He lowered his head, pressing her fingers to his lips. "You should have told me. I would have stayed. I would have fought for both of you." Tears streamed silently down his cheeks. He didn't care about his suit or the millions in his bank account. He only cared about the woman slipping away before him. His heart was breaking all over again. He thought of Lyra, standing in the rain, selling a toy to save her mother. A child shouldn't carry that kind of pain. Not when she had a father aching to love her. He looked around the sterile room, at the machines and the pale light. Then he leaned closer, brushing his thumb along her cheek. "Come back, Maris," he choked. "We're not done." A tear escaped her closed eyelid. His breath caught. Then, a flicker. Her eyelids moved. Silas froze. Maris? Her lips parted, faintly. Then, with the weakest breath, she whispered, Silas. And his world shattered all over again. Silas couldn't move. Her voice, soft, raspy, barely there, had pierced a hole through decades of silence. Silas? She whispered again, eyes glassy with pain and wonder. He stepped closer, unable to believe she was real, alive, and speaking his name. Tears spilled silently down his face as he took her frail hand in his trembling ones. The machines beeped steadily around her, but time had stopped between them. Maris, pale and fading, gave him the weakest smile he'd ever seen. I didn't want you to hate me, she said. He shook his head, heart thudding, voice cracking. I never stopped loving you. She closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek, and whispered, She's just like you. His breath caught. Lyra? Maris nodded faintly, and Silas felt the world shift under his feet. In that moment, everything made sense. The name, the eyes, the fire in her soul. He glanced back at the hallway, aching to see Lyra's face. But she wasn't there. Panic jolted him. Where had she gone? He rushed out of the hospital room, scanning left and right. A nurse passed him, startled by his urgency. Little girl in a yellow jacket. Have you seen her? She ran down the corridor crying, holding a toy, the nurse replied. Without wasting a second, Silas sprinted down the hallway. His footsteps echoed in the sterile white corridor. He turned the corner and found her, hunched on a bench, clutching the elephant toy to her chest. Her tiny body was shaking, face buried in the soft fabric of the toy. He slowed down, chest heaving, trying to steady his breath. And his heart. Lyra, he said gently. She looked up, startled, cheeks wet with fresh tears. Is she gone? She whispered. He knelt in front of her, brushing the hair from her face. No, sweetheart, she's holding on, for you. Lyra bit her lip, trying to be brave. I brought the toy. Maybe it'll help. Silas smiled through the ache in his soul. You still believed? She nodded. This is her favorite. It has all my wishes in it. He looked down at the worn, beloved toy in her hands, its stitching tired, its eyes almost faded. I was trying to sell it, she admitted quietly. His heart broke all over again. I thought, if someone kind took it, maybe it would turn into medicine. Silas exhaled, overcome. You should never have had to choose between love and survival. She blinked at him, not understanding fully. He slowly reached out, resting his hand over hers, both wrapped around the toy. You never had to sell this, he said softly. Lyra looked up at him, confused. But how else would I help Mommy? He smiled sadly, eyes shining with emotion. Because you're not alone anymore. She tilted her head. You sound like you know us. Silas's throat tightened. More than you know. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a faded photograph. It was a picture of him and Maris, young and in love, laughing under a blossom tree. He handed it to her, and she stared, eyes wide. That's Mommy, she whispered. And me, he added, his voice trembling. But, you, she stammered, trying to make sense of the impossible. I never knew she was pregnant, he said, tears now falling freely. She looked down at the toy again, her heart racing. My mommy said Daddy was in heaven. Silas swallowed hard. She was protecting your heart. But the truth is, I'm right here. Lyra's lip trembled. You're my daddy? He nodded, and for a moment the whole world was still. Silas reached into his shirt and pulled out a silver locket. Inside was the same toy elephant, hand-stitched in miniature. Maris made this for me when we were young, he said, before life got in the way. Lyra clutched her toy tighter, stunned. My mommy made this one for me, she whispered. Their eyes met, both flooded with years of ache, love, and longing. Silas gently placed his forehead against hers. You're mine, he said. You always were. Lyra blinked rapidly. Does that mean I have a daddy now? He laughed through his tears. No, sweet girl. It means you always did. She lunged forward, arms wrapping around his neck with all the strength her small body held. He held her like he'd never let go again. For a moment, time stood still, just a man and his daughter finding each other in a hallway of heartbreak. The toy rested between them, soaked in both their tears. "Silas, kiss," said the top of her head. "You're not selling it anymore." Lyra nodded against his chest. "I don't need to. I have something better." "What's that?" he whispered. "A real reason to hope." He held her tighter, promising silently that he'd never fail her again. The hallway lights flickered softly above them, like heaven itself had paused to watch. Lyra pulled back slightly and looked into his eyes. "You won't leave, right? Not now, not ever." She smiled, wiping her tears with the toy's ear. Silas stood, lifting her in his arms, and as they turned back toward Maris's hospital room, he whispered, "It's time to bring our family home." Just as he reaches the hospital room door, Silas pauses, looks into Lyra's eyes, and says, "Because I'm your daddy." Lyra blinked up at him, her toy clutched tightly against her chest, the word daddy echoing in her little heart like a bell that had never rung before. Soft, foreign, yet oddly warm. Her lips trembled, unsure if she should believe, but her soul already knew, and in that flicker of silence, she threw her arms around Silas with a gasp of breath that had been held for 6 long years, whispering, "You came." And Silas held her tighter than he ever thought he could, burying his face in her golden curls, tears falling freely as if years of emptiness were pouring out at once. And across the hallway, the nurse smiled knowingly, stepping aside as Maris, now sitting up in bed, watched from the door, hand over her heart, eyes filled with the unbearable ache of time lost and a love that never died. Silas carried Lyra to her mother, gently laying her beside Maris, and the three stared at one another like a puzzle long scattered and now finally whole. Maris tried to speak, but words choked in her throat, so Silas kneeled and cupped her hand, whispering, "You should have told me." And she shook her head through tears. "I wanted to. But when I found out I was pregnant, your company had just gone public, your life was exploding with meetings and headlines. I didn't want to be your burden." And Silas broke, voice cracking. "You were never a burden. You were my everything." And Lyra reached for her mother's fingers and tucked her toy into Maris's arms as if to say, "This is ours now." And the nurse returned with forms, but Silas waved them off and handed her a black card, saying quietly, "Every bill, every treatment, every day she needs," and then turned to Lyra, "You never have to worry again. Not about money, not about losing her, not about being alone." And Lyra nodded slowly, not because she understood everything, but because for the first time, someone had promised forever, and meant it. Maris clutched Silas's hand, whispering, "I watched our daughter grow with your eyes, and I hated myself for keeping you apart." And he kissed her forehead. "What matters is we're here now." And the room, once sterile and pale, began to feel like the first warm place they'd known in years. Later that night, after the IV had been adjusted and Maris was peacefully resting, Lyra curled beside her mother, toy nestled between them like a guardian angel made of fabric and stuffing, and Silas sat close by, never taking his eyes off them, his phone buzzing with missed board meetings, urgent investor calls. But he ignored them all. For the first time he realized, nothing mattered more than this quiet healing moment with the two girls who had always been his heart, even when he didn't know it. The next morning, Maris's condition improved slightly, and the doctors, now aware of Silas's involvement, gave their full attention and care, and he made a vow to build a foundation in her name, for single mothers with cancer, for little girls who sell hope on sidewalks, for families almost lost to silence and pride. Lyra, meanwhile, found her laughter again, filling the room with soft giggles as she made her toy dance at the foot of the bed, humming a made-up song about unicorns and superheroes and a daddy who saves the day, and Silas watched her in awe, realizing she'd never asked for luxury, just love, presence, a family. A week later, Maris was discharged with her treatment fully arranged, and Silas moved them both into his home overlooking the park, where he'd once watched lonely children play, never knowing his own daughter had been among them. the house filled with warmth again, Lyra's drawings taped to kitchen walls, Maris's soft laughter over breakfast, and Silas's deep voice reading bedtime stories every night. They weren't perfect, there were still healing days, hard talks, slow forgiveness, but love didn't need to be perfect to be powerful. And one evening, as the sun poured through the living room window in golden streaks, Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor, toy in her lap, eyes full of peace as she looked at her parents holding hands on the couch. And in a voice no longer burdened by fear, she whispered to no one in particular, maybe to the sky, maybe to a memory. "All I wanted was to save my mommy, but I think I saved my whole family."